let's talk about a couple other cases.
Sure.
You represented a guy named Allen.
Bill Allen.
Bill Allen, who was originally arrested and prosecuted in 1968 or 9
68.
for
Murder of 2 police officers.
in North Nashville.
Yep, in North Nashville.
Tell us about
How I got
he was
involved.
convicted of first-degree murder.
Oh,
back
that's
then.
an interesting case.
Yeah.
Civil rights. It was during the riots when the cities were burning. In fact, the police officers, the patrol officers, were wearing helmets in their cruisers. So they were. There was a shootout between these 4 African-American college-age students and 2 police officers, one white, one black. The officers get killed, the guys get away. They get caught and they're brought back to trial. Tom Shriver, who was a district attorney, your boss.
Later a judge.
Later a great judge.
Right.
And someone that also was a mentor to me in terms
Yes.
of watching and learning from wonderful older professional lawyers.
Yes, and a mentor to many young lawyers.
Yes.
In the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yes.
Yes.
And he did offer me a job one time.
That I did not know. We'll talk about that in a minute. Back to
Okay.
the Allen case.
So Bill Allen gets, so all these 4 men go to trial.
Bill Allen was one of
Was one
4
of the 4.
co-defendants.
And the state did not seek death.
Oh, they did not.
No.
That may have been during the time the death penalty was
Might have been.
unconstitutional.
Yeah, because
No.
it probably would have been, because it was pre-Furman. Well,
Well, if it was
No, I
pre-Furman,
guess it
the
would have
death
been.
penalty.
but they got 99 years.
Okay.
All 4 of the defendants got 99 years. And they separated the victims. And so this was the trial of the white officer. And he got 99 years. And so the 4 defendants were sent to the walls, the old penitentiary.
Main prison.
Main
Department of
prison.
Correction.
And there was a picnic ground, and even though they were serving a 99-year sentence, they had it's maximum security prison, but they had the right to go on the picnic grounds, and back then, families came and picnicked.
Uh-huh.
They literally walked out.
Huh.
Now, obviously there was some inside help. People brought them clothes. They changed out of their prison clothes, and they walked out, and they were on the run for over 20
Did they all 4 walk
years.
out
Yes,
together?
yes.
Or did they split up
No.
after they left?
Well, once they got out, they basically went separate ways, and they were on the run for 20 years.
Wow.
They finally get caught, and the FBI was chasing them. Now, as an aside, what was interesting was that Bill Allen twice went out of the country. He returned to Africa. He was a real, in his own ways, he was all about civil rights. He insists that, yes, the shot was fired in self-defense. And it might have been. Anyway, so they catch him. They catch all the guys. One of them is found hung in the Baltimore City Jail among some real serious speculation as to whether or not he was murdered or committed suicide. So 2 of them, Bill and I think the other gentleman's name was Kennedy. We went to trial
This
for the
is
second murder.
Okay. Just so we're clear. Oh, the murder of the black
Second
police officer.
Yes,
That trial had never taken
had
place.
never taken place.
So now we're talking about 1985 or 86, 7, 8, or somewhere in the 80s.
Yeah, might even been the early 90s. And Walter Kurtz was the judge. And it was quite a trial. We brought the mayor of Baltimore in as a witness because he was a TSU student at the time. And immediately after the shooting, they did a roundup. And the police went over to TSU into Fisk, and all the male black students were rounded up. Many of them were abused. He lost his hearing in one ear, and from being hit by the police. And so he testified. I don't remember what the issue was.
Prosecution still had witnesses.
They were able
Still
to Steve
put together
Dozier. Steve Dozier, who's now judge,
at
criminal court
that time,
was a young
assistant DA.
His father was a
Major
police
Tom
major,
Dozier, yes.
and he did an excellent job.
Building a case.
Building the case. Bill insisted on testifying, and he wanted to testify. And I can remember, as we were preparing him for trial, we said, "Now, Bill, you have always said this is a case of self-defense, and that's our defense. This is not about civil rights. This is not about Dr. King. You cannot allow your political views to come into this trial. It's going to hurt us."
Had Judge Kurtz ruled maybe on a motion in limine, the state tried to keep all that out.
Yes, and there was a bunch.
Probably Judge Kurtz had narrowly strict.
Very strict rules. This is not coming in. This is not coming in. He wouldn't even let us bring out the fact that the officers were wearing helmets. To this day, I tell Walter whenever we mention that case that was another bad decision he made. But anyway,
so you're having to tell your client he can't venture out into all this stuff.
So Bill testifies, and the direct is great. Sumter does a wonderful job, and he tells a very compelling story. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching the jury. And then the cross. And in the cross, Bill forgot everything we told him. And he proceeds to start talking about the fact that Dr. King and what it means, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of which was true. All of which you could immediately see the jury was gone. Black militant, state's theory, they're right. He fired first. And Bill, of course, testified, no, the officer had fired first, and the state's theory was...
The state's theory, he was an angry black militant who premeditated the murder of a
And they
police
intentionally led the officers down into this part on an icy road, into a secluded, dark warehouse area. So when the officers came out, Bill came out with the rifle and started shooting.
So there goes your client's credibility.
And I can remember to this day, he sat down next to me, and I turned to him and I said, "Bill, I will always respect you as a man, but I'll always hate you as a client because you just convicted yourself."
Wow.
And now the end of the story is a very interesting story. Jury gave him like 26 years, whatever the number was that he was out. Walt found out later from talking to the jury.
Just to clarify that point, although by the 1980s there was no jury sentencing in Tennessee, it had been abolished in 1982 because this crime was committed in the 60s when jury sentencing was still the law in Tennessee. The jury had sentencing authority.
And I want to say the range was like 20 to 99 years is what the range was.
Yep.
And so whatever the amount of time that he had been out is what the jurors gave him, which was interesting.
Oh, interesting.
As to the other defendant, they might even have convicted him of a lesser offense, gave him a lesser sentence. Judge Kurtz was so convinced that he was innocent, he actually went to bat for him. And because the guys were serving the first sentence, they still hadn't finished that first sentence.
The 99-year first.
Yes, and in fact, the jury found the co-defendant not guilty. That's what it was.
Okay.
But he was still serving that. Walter wrote the governor and explained that, in his opinion, based upon everything that the whole story now being told, that an injustice had occurred, and he got out.
The governor commuted his sentence?
He got out. Didn't live real long, and he died, which takes us back to Bill. Bill Allen is alive and well and out. Bill came up for parole, and he went to prison, was a model prisoner, and became quite a carpenter. And if you go out to Riverbend today, all of the desks, anything that's wooden, Bill built.
Is that right?
Yes. And he became a mentor to young inmates, and he's still doing that today.
And he's out and living a productive life.
Very much so.
And you helped him get out, or you represented him?
Sumter and I didn't represent him, but we were there and we assisted as best we could behind the scene.
Interesting. Well,
So that's
I
talking
hope
about
he's-
Ron Harries.
All right, Ron Harries, and I don't remember hardly anything about the case. So, except he was convicted of some horrible murder. I want to say in East Tennessee.
Yeah, it wasn't
not horrible. A non-horrible murder.
Well, it was an armed robbery. I mean, I hate to say it. I
Yeah.
mean, it wasn't a torture killing.
Okay.
He was robbing the clerk, and in the course of the robbery, the clerk got killed. I'm not trying to minimize.
Right,
But
but compared to some other
Yeah, some of the other.
heinous ones, it wasn't as bad.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's felony murder. And of course,
Right.
one of the issues, and ultimately that is what got Ron ultimately off the row when the court finally said if your only aggravator is felony murder, then you got a problem with the death sentence. How I get involved with Ron Harries is Ron Harries decides to die. He is tired of being on death row, and he notifies his attorneys to drop all appeals, and he is going to be executed. And Ron was from Cleveland, Ohio, and he was raised Catholic. So at this point, Bill Reddick, who got, going back to when I first started working with Lionel, Bill was the director of the Capital Case Resource Center, which was the organization that did all of the capital post-conviction relief in the state of Tennessee. So Bill reaches out to me and says, listen, we got a volunteer, and we think you're the perfect person to convince him that that's not such a good idea. And he was raised Catholic like you, and he's from the North like you, so we want you to go and convince Ron that he needs to
Maintain
pick up his appeals.
appeal, yeah.
So I said, okay. So I go to see him. And Ron says to me, you're here as my lawyer. And I said, I am here as your lawyer. He says, so that means you have to follow my wishes. And I said, well, it depends on what your wishes are. But he says, I want to die. And that started an unbelievable set of litigation for me, because as Ron Harries' lawyer, I litigated he had a right to be executed. Now, of course, I'm totally opposed to the death penalty with every fiber of my body.
But
And
you were honoring your duty to follow your client's wishes. and
Yes.
Yes.
And so there was still a question about whether or not the governor would commute his sentence. And Bill Koch, who became a Supreme Court justice
Yes.
and is now the dean of the National School of Law,
Yes.
was legal counsel to Lamar Alexander, who
Yes.
became Senator Alexander.
Yes.
And I can remember Lionel had asked me to go handle the case for him down in Memphis when we got the word that there would be no commutation, and if Ron wanted to die, he could die. I was in Memphis when I got the word, and I said, Judge, I got to go.
He had been on death row for how long?
Long time.
Like 10 or 15, 20
10,
years?
15
Okay.
years. And the conditions on death row were getting worse and worse and worse. There had been a change in administration in terms of the warden, and the one warden treated the men almost like any other sentenced inmate who was there. Then another warden came along, and changes in administration and changes from the Department of Corrections, and now they're in 24/7 lockdown, and it was horrible. The conditions were
Okay.
really bad and getting worse. So anyway, so we're getting ready for the execution, to the point where I am negotiating with Bill Koch, legal counsel, because Ron said, I do have one request. I said, what's that, Ron? He said, I want you to be there when they execute me.
Wanted you to be there.
Because this was electric chair time.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm really afraid they're going to screw it up. And I want you there. Now, he had a minister, wonderful, wonderful woman, and she was going to be there. Well, they wouldn't let me in. But we were negotiating that I could be with him up until the moment that they took him from the death watch, because he was on death watch. 5 days before executions, you went in a special cell. They called it death watch. And then you literally walked from death watch into the electric chair chamber, and you put in the chair, and old Sparky went to work. And so we were negotiating, if I could be there up until death watch, could I be on the other side of the door? In the event something happened, I would have access to a phone, landline. A lot of people watching this might be surprised to know that the overwhelming majority of the prison guards and the prison wardens that I got to know over the years did not support the death penalty. They didn't think it was a deterrent. They thought it was inhumane. And
The actual hands-on, down on the ground people that
the warden of the
interacted
institution,
with the
and
inmates.
because they got to know these guys,
Right.
and they got to
Saw
know
their
them,
humanity.
yes, and they
Right.
got to know them as people.
Right.
And a lot of and I can remember having a conversation with one of the wardens who said, most of the guys on the row are mentally ill, which is all true. So anyway, we got that close. Well, then a lawsuit gets filed by an inmate by the name of Grosclose. And the argument is that if Ron Harries is allowed to die, and he's only doing it because the conditions on death row are so bad, then that's cruel and unusual punishment, and therefore he can't be executed. And Larry Woods, who's now a retired lawyer, who was involved in a lot of very interesting litigation, excellent lawyer, did a lot of death penalty work, took the case.
Representing Grosclose.
Yes, and
Right.
he files a motion to stop Ron Harries' execution for those various reasons. The case gets assigned to Judge John Nixon, who's now deceased. And Judge Nixon was a Kennedy Democrat, Peace Corps, old school, civil rights leaning liberal judge.
Strongly opposed to the
And
capital
strongly opposed to capital punishment. So, so the long story, make it real short, is as a lawyer, people say, what was the most difficult position you've ever taken? We're having a hearing in open court, and I am opposing Larry Woods' request to stop my client's execution. And I was arguing to Judge Nixon that my client had a constitutional right to die, to be executed. And we finished our argument, and it was, man, I mean, you know me, Paul, I can get pretty fiery. I was fiery. And, you have no right being here, yada, yada, yada. And I was having some issues with Larry Woods at that point anyway. But, and damn it, I was going to do my job. And we finished the argument, and the judge says, well, recess. And Judge Nixon's courtroom, which was, obviously in the federal building, was huge. And must have been from the podium to the door leading out, you had at least 20 rows, church-like rows. And so I can remember I walked out, and I stepped into the hallway, and the good friend of mine, social worker, Jeff Blum, who was working at the Capital Case Resource Center, had been my executive director when I was president of TACTL, Tennessee Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and he was there. And I buried my head in his shoulder and cried like a baby. Luckily,
your duty to your client was paramount,
Yes.
as it had to be,
Had
to
to be.
your
personal views.
personal view opposing the death penalty.
Absolutely. And so after...
I'm sorry, real quick. Was the horrible unsanitary conditions of death row the only reason Harry said he wanted to die, or did he have separate and independent
No,
reasons?
it was how the men were being forced to live.
Okay.
The 24/7 lockdown.
So had the conditions been
They'd
more
gotten
humane,
worse.
he would not have wanted. to die.
I agree. No, he would not have
Okay.
wanted to die.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, no. It was the changing of the conditions, and they had become harsher and harsher. Let me give you an example. I can remember Ron saying, when I first got on the road, the guards left you alone. They didn't mess with you. He says, do you see what they're carrying now? Well, they were carrying 2-foot-long billy bats, small baseball bats. And Ron would say, what the hell is that for? And he says, it was a change in the mentality. He says, as an example of the guards, where the guards went from, I got a job to do, you're an inmate, okay, that's fine, to very hostile. So anyway, here's the end of the story. Ron finally says, Judge Nixon then appoints Hal Hardin.
Hal being a former U.S. attorney
Former
and
U.S.
circuit
attorney,
judge,
former
now
circuit court judge, now talk
private
about
practice,
one of the
top
icons of the bar.
Nashville Bar, absolutely.
Yeah.
And by the way, host of the Nashville Bar Historical Committee meetings in his office on the second floor of the Stallman Building,
is.
which is fascinating. Go ahead.
And a Cannon County farmer, by the way.
Yes.
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
He's my neighbor in Cannon County. Anyway, so Hal gets appointed, and I want to say is like Ron's guardian. And he gets involved in the case and very quickly realizes that, Ron doesn't really want to die, but he can't stand the situation. So it's like, well, why don't we file a lawsuit? And so Larry Woods files the lawsuit to have death row declared unconstitutional. And everybody joins in on it. So that leads us into an incredible trial, ultimately, about the conditions on death row.
Yes.
And Judge Nixon goes to death row because he wants to see it for himself.
Right.
Now, I was told later that every inmate was told, if you say one word, we're going to beat your ass as soon as the judge leaves. So Judge Nixon, and death row had 3 halls.
Right.
And you had one wall of cells, and then there was a middle hallway that had cells on either side, and then you had the 4th cell.
Now, the death row, are we talking about the old?
The old death row.
The old wall, not the new facility?
No.
not
The
Riverbend,
new
right.
facility didn't exist.
Right.
So no, it was it unit? I think it was called Unit 6 at the time. Anyway, so Judge Nixon goes out there.
To inspect the
He
conditions.
wanted to see for himself. Well, we get all these experts at the government expense, state of Tennessee's expense. And I can remember crawling with this expert in a pair of sweatpants and a sweatshirt. We were literally between the walls because that's where the ventilation system, and he was measuring the amount of ventilation. I mean, it was...
He was really...
Oh, he did his job. And candidly, he was huge. And part of what Rich had to do was, go into some of these spots, and I'm holding the little device that's measuring the air because Mr. Expert was a little bit too large to get between the cells. I went between the damn cell walls. So, make a long story short, judge declares death row unconstitutional. No executions can therefore go forward. That's the reason in Tennessee there were no executions. They had to build a new prison. That's when they built Riverbend and put death row out there. We had no executions because of the lawsuit. And the irony is that it all started with one inmate.
This was a direct outcome of the Ronald Harries
Yes.
litigation. So
Yeah.
what year would that have been that Judge Nixon ruled?
Oh, gosh.
Early 90s?
Yeah, I'm thinking that.
Okay. Did the state appeal his ruling to the, I guess, 6th Circuit?
I'm not so sure they did. I know.
For whatever reason, I'm
I'm not, but it led to It led to set a moratorium on the death penalty.
Right.
And then it led to the building of the new prison.
Right,
River
at
Bend.
River Bend, which has its death row.
So that was,
So you were right in the middle of
Yeah.
the successful litigation to declare unconstitutional.
and that went on for years. That's how I really got to know Hal Hardin, which was
Yes.
a real privilege
Yeah.
and a real treat. Learned a lot. Talk about learning from lawyers.
Tell us about some of the other lawyers that have been you've worked with or even worked against. You've already mentioned Hal Hardin, Joe Binkley, Dan Garfinkel, Lionel Barrett, Dale Quillen.
Yeah.
Who are some of the other attorneys? You by now are an influence on many younger and not so young attorneys.
Well,
Richard.
over time, I guess that you stick around long enough, and I'm in my 42nd year. Gosh, I'm privileged to work with some incredibly talented lawyers.
Yes.
You know,
Just to catch you up to date, your own private practice now is
Oh, yeah.
where and
I'm on Rosa Parks Boulevard,
right,
north Germantown.
right. How long have you been there?
I've got 20 years. Hard to
You've
believe.
been there, so you started out there about
I-
2001 or
Yeah, I was with Lionel for 10 years.
so? Uh-huh.
Learned a ton. And then a couple of us went and got a building over in East Nashville. We was one of the first lawyers.
Where was that?
Oh,
Was it on Woodland Street?
Yeah, it was on Woodland Street.
Yeah, okay, I do remember that.
And we were there when the tornado hit.
1998.
Yeah, we were there when the tornado hit. Anyway, then we got a chance to, five of us, to get a building. And it was David Lyons, who's now deceased.
Yes.
He was primarily a civil lawyer. John Oliva,
Yes.
who's still with
Very good lawyer.
excellent lawyer and good friend and travel companion, and we're still there. And Bobby Ballinger.
Yes.
Bobby Ballinger came from the public defender's office and became and is a brilliant lawyer.
Yes.
He's with us. Wendy Tucker.
Yes.
And Wendy Tucker is one of the finest lawyers I have ever had the privilege
Yes.
of working with, and she and I got to work on some pretty interesting cases, including Centoya Brown.
Talk about that in just a second. Just to round it, so you have set up the office on
1308
Rosa
Parks
Parks.
Boulevard.
Right. On a personal, your son Kevin is practicing law.
Yes.
Has been, what, 8 or 10 years
Oh,
now?
no, Kevin it's hard to believe. He is close to his 15th
Are you
year.
kidding me? I still think of him as just barely out of law school.
No. And in fact, I'm second chair on 2 of his homicide
Is
cases.
that right?
We've got, and then I dipped into the district attorney's ranks. We were always PD North.
Yes.
So many of the public defenders who
Yes.
left went in private practice came our way. Well, I broke the tradition.
Yes,
And one of the senior prosecutors, Lisa Naylor,
yes.
who kept kicking me around the courtroom. And I always tell people I got tired of Lisa kicking me around, and I made her come and join us in private
She's
practice.
a very fine lawyer and got a great personality, wonderful person.
Incredible lawyer. And so we've been
Yeah.
together. She's been with us for 11 years.
Just to back up, I believe you were starting to talk about the Centoya Brown, just to, I believe, catch up there. Centoya Brown was a juvenile, a young girl, maybe 15, 16 years old, who was charged with the murder of her, for lack of
John.
her John. She was a teenage prostitute
Being pimped
and
and abused.
abused, and she shot and killed her John, who I want to say his name was Allen, Mr.
Johnny Allen.
Johnny Allen. And the prosecuting attorneys were Jeff Burks and Lisa Naylor. This was, I believe, around 2005 or 6, somewhere in there. And the jury returned a verdict of guilty against her for first-degree murder and maybe some other counts.
An aggravated robbery.
Aggravated robbery. This was, I believe, in Judge Wyatt's.
Randall Wyatt's court.
Judge Randall Wyatt, longtime
judge.
criminal court judge,
Recent.
very well known, recently retired, well known to all of us. He was the trial judge.
He
in
was
this
a trial
employment.
judge.
And he sentenced her to how
Life,
long?
well, it was life.
Life plus.
And I guess in retrospect, the big battle that we won was that we got the armed robbery running concurrent with the life sentence, thank God, because Centoya worked her way out of prison by becoming a student, took advantage of an opportunity to go to Belmont, I guess, or was it David Lipscomb?
I don't
I don't
know.
recall, one of the two, and she wound up getting her degree. And when her entire story was finally able to be told, it resulted in her receiving a reduction in her sentence by then Governor Haslam, and she was released about 3 years ago. She had served around 17 or 18 years when she was released.
Anything else you want to say about representing her?
Well,
at the trial?
it's a great example of how the times, what's going on in America, what's going on in the world, can impact on a case. Centoya was trafficked. She was trafficked. She was pimped. And we now have specialized unit in the specialized prosecution units in your office,
Yes.
as an example, that go after the traffickers,
Yes.
who with severe punishments, as it should be.
Yes.
We have special rehabilitation programs for these young girls who get
Yes.
caught up in these situations. Back then, we didn't have it.
Right.
The concept of trafficking didn't exist. You know, to stand up, that case would never have gone to trial today. It would have been resolved, and she would have served some years in jail, but no way would she have gotten a life sentence, in my opinion. And I don't think a jury, even if we had to go to trial, because nowadays I could stand up and say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a simple case. You see this child sitting right there? She was the victim of the worst kind of abuse, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Back then I couldn't do that, because if you don't speak ill of the dead, right? That's what they tell you anyway.
But had she served just a year or two or three, if that long, she would not have had the opportunities to develop her interest in education, self-education, that she actually got
Her degree.
by being incarcerated
Yeah.
for as long. So she might have gotten out when she was maybe 20, 21 years old and gone back to the streets.
Yep.
So there are just two sides to it. And,
Oh, yeah.
and although most certainly and understandably would condemn the length of her sentence and the circumstances it caused her to have to serve that sentence or commit the crime in the first place, in the long run, it might have benefited her.
Karma.
She has not gone back to her old life at all.
Nope.
And some credit to the length of time and the education afforded to her by the Department of Corrections must be given.
And you ready for again, the I just can't believe that coincidence? Her
Yeah.
teacher was the prosecuting attorney on the appeal.
Oh, yeah? Who was
I don't remember the name, he did not realize that his student, they didn't connect
Wait, he taught classes
at the prison.
He had a second job.
Well, I think it might have been volunteer work.
Okay.
And lo and behold, at one point in time, the connection was made, and by then, it's like I'd gotten to know this person, and he became one of her advocates to
Isn't that
assist
something?
in getting her out.
Right. Rich, I want to switch gears a little
Okay.
bit. I want to ask you, in addition to being a stellar and distinguished criminal defense attorneys, you've also participated in the life of our community in civic organizations or legal organizations. Tell us about some of the stuff you've done. You mentioned you were past president of Tactile.
I've been involved in Tennessee Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers since 1980. I have held every office that you can hold, including president. But what I get really excited about every year is our trial college.
Tell us just a little bit about that.
Sure. Tactile has a trial college. We've had it for almost 20 years. Started by a great lawyer out of Memphis by the name of Bill Massey. It's patterned after the NCDC, the National Criminal Defense College, and it's a week-long program. And young lawyers come in, and we have a faculty of 2 lawyers per group. Average size of a group is 6 to 8, and we've had as high as 50 lawyers in the program. We go from Monday from 2:30 in the afternoon to 9 o'clock at night. We go Tuesday from 8:30 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. We go Wednesday 8:30 in the morning to 7 o'clock at night. Thursday 8:30 in the morning to 6 o'clock at night. And then we're benevolent on the last day.
Now, you say we go, are you giving lectures? Are you having like
Both.
trials?
No. It's a trial college. So we start with how you analyze a case, and we go all the way through final argument. And every day, every lawyer is on their feet giving at least 2 presentations every section. So they're on their feet at least 5 times a day. Opening statements, jury selections, directs, crosses, final arguments. And we teach a method, and the faculty is, I'm honored to be on the faculty. We got lawyers from East Tennessee to West Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, incredible experienced trial lawyers. And what we always, and I've been doing it for 15 years. Now, prior to that, I was an instructor at the National Institute of Trial Advocacy for close to 10 years. And now and in the last 4 years, I've been an adjunct at Vanderbilt, where along with retired U.S. Attorney Bill Cohen, a great lawyer, he and I banged heads on a number of cases.
You teach trial ad there with him
it's
at Vanderbilt Law.
It's a advanced criminal practice and evidence class.
Terrific work outside your daily, still very active practice, and you say you're in good health.
Yeah.
Do you have any?
Knock on wood. Now the other thing we're doing, and I'm proud of this, is we did start up at our shop, at our office. We did start up what's called the Round Table, and the Round Table was initiated by Ed Ryan, who's now
Assistant DA
in your office,
yes.
and an attorney by the name of Marty Zygas, who's
Yes.
now retired, and Ron McKinney.
Another prominent attorney.
Yes, we started up a mentoring program. It's called the Round Table, and once a month we meet at the office, and we'll usually have a topic that we're going to address, or we'll do case review of all the most recent cases. It's free. Any lawyer who wants to come can come. We supply the pizza and the beer. And we've been doing it for almost 15 years. Well, that got adopted statewide, and so
Terrific.
So we now have roundtables in 8 cities, I think, meeting once a month. And as an organization, it's a wonderful way to mentor the young lawyers.
I want to ask you, switching gears once again a little bit, how has the practice of criminal defense changed over the 40-plus years you've practiced? What you could give multiple examples. I want one that continues to affect me and other assistant DAs, and to me is a huge change over the way it used to be done, is discovery. When you and I started out, the rules of criminal procedure, of which Rule 16 specifying discovery was brand new. Before that, it was pretty much a sporting theory of justice. You went into trial knowing little or nothing about what evidence your opponent
And that
had.
has totally changed.
That's totally changed.
Yeah.
But even for, in the, quote, early years after Rule 16, the rules of criminal procedure were adopted, it was pretty much the state gave you what only they had to give you. And they did that, or most DA's offices did.
They're supposed to.
We're supposed to. Wouldn't you say now, or in the last 10 or 15 years, the amount of discovery you get is greater. Of course, a lot of that is there is more evidence marshaled by law enforcement now than there used to be. You've got cell phone evidence. You've got jail calls now. You've got
Body
DNA,
cams.
which is a whole new frontier.
You got You got
Yes,
the
so-
social media
Yes,
investigation
yes.
on both sides.
The law enforcement, the police and prosecutors, for better or worse, have much more evidence than they used to, and the defense does. So how has that played into just day-to-day practice
Well,
compared to how it used to be?
To do it right takes more time.
Yeah,
You can have a DUI case as an example. You might have 4 hours of body cams, and you might have 2 officers. And so, to do it right, you're doing a lot of reviewing and listening of electronically produced evidence. When we first started, that didn't exist.
occasionally you might have a cassette player hidden in the car, and the police.
Yes, yeah.
But
And the
you-
police didn't, and the interrogations were never recorded.
Right.
Where now you
Right.
almost never have.
Right, they're all
They're all recorded.
recorded. Right.
So that's a big part of it. I'd like to, now, I have been blessed in the fact that I practice in Nashville, Tennessee primarily, and I've practiced all my career in Nashville, Tennessee. I go out of county is the exception. And I've been blessed because when I talk to lawyers, be it at the college or at a conference, and you listen to the horror stories about prosecutors' offices that have policies of hiding evidence, where you have police departments who intentionally don't record, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's good old-fashioned, malfeasance. We don't have that.
In Nashville specifically.
And I am so blessed with, in my entire career, with judges who, across the board, have always treated me with respect, who treat my clients with respect, a district attorney's office, when I go back, with General Shriver and then General Johnson and now General Funk, there's no toleration of hiding the ball. And so that has changed. Now, and the other thing that has changed, and this goes back to Walter Kurtz. When I first became a lawyer in 1978, lawyers didn't file pretrial motions. There was no such thing as a motion to suppress evidence. Motions in limine, motions, you just didn't have that. Walter came along, and Walt is the one who said, we're filing motions to suppress, et cetera, et cetera. And I can remember early on, I'm going into court with these motions, and everybody's going, what is this stuff? And we're saying,
You're talking about when he became public defender in 1978.
Yes, when Walt became public defender in 1978. And
he revolutionized the motion practice.
He absolutely.
In Nashville.
And
in criminal cases.
That's the way you did it.
Yeah.
And I could still remember then going in, even years later, going out of county and dropping motions to suppress, and DA's going, son, we don't do that around here. And you say, well, there's a new sheriff in town, General, and yeah, we do. And that has been such a huge.
The standard motion for discovery that is still used by most, if virtually all, public defenders and private bar attorneys in Nashville is pretty much, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the one that Walter Kurtz designed in probably 1978 or 9.
Yep.
It asked for a lot of information. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
It's tweeted a little bit, and as we've gotten into the world of electronics.
Sure.
I'll tell you the other thing that has changed. Candidly, the quality of the teaching of lawyers to be as trial lawyers has dramatically changed. I can remember coming out of law school, and I took a trial advocacy class. I don't know if I got much out of it, and I had good mentors, and you learn from watching.
Right.
I got a break early on in my career in that I got sent to the National Institute of Trial Advocacy trial school. And it was a 3-week program. And it was broken up into 2 sessions. Tori Johnson and I went together. And Mariah Wooten.
Just to clarify, Victor
Former-
S. Torrey Johnson, longtime district attorney
Yeah.
of Davidson County.
And now professor at Belmont Law School, which didn't exist back then.
Right, right.
So I was really lucky. I got to go to a trial program, and that was really important for me in my development. But I can tell you, we're teaching law students techniques that I didn't even know existed until I've been practicing for years and years and years.
Back in the quote early days, far fewer lawyers had any kind of formal training in trial advocacy.
Absolutely.
It was pretty much on the job.
Yeah, you learn it
You
on
get
the
in there
job.
and try which was valuable. I mean, it certainly had its place.
Yes,
But
that's changed.
That's changed dramatically.
We like I said, between NACTL, I never went to Spence's program. I regret that I didn't, but I couldn't take 3
Jerry
weeks.
Spence.
Jerry Spence's program. I wish I had. I know a few lawyers who did, and everyone who went, of course, raved about it. I just couldn't take 3 weeks off. I could, in retrospect, could have. Sure, but I was raising a family. I was working a lot, and so I didn't do that. The program that I started teaching at, the NETA program, which was like a 4-day program, I learned a lot as a quote, faculty. I learned a lot from the other teachers and the other lawyers. Got to go to the National one year in Boulder. That was quite a program. So I have been blessed that in my entire legal career, I have been associated with some kind of trial school. About 15 years ago, I said to my wife, I feel like I'm in a rut. Here I am, teacher at the college, regular lecturer, had taught at NETA all these years, but I just feel like I'm in a rut. She says, well, find a program. And so we did. We went to the Western Trial Advocacy Institute, which was a 1-week spin-off of Jerry Spence's program. And it was great to be with lawyers who were about my age. And by then I'd been practicing 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we learned from each other. Terry McCarthy, the author of McCarthy on Cross, was there. He was one of my instructors. Josh Carton, who was the first leading communication expert, non-lawyer, was one of my teachers. And I learned so much from these guys. And I've been able to take it and pass it on. So to me, there's a massive change. Unfortunately, Mr. DeWitt, General DeWitt, your boss keeps hiring my students coming out of Vanderbilt. And I had one of the assistants, I'm in court the other day, flipped something on me, and I looked at her, and she said, you taught that to me. I said, I know I taught that to you, and I told you you could not use it against me.
Rich is talking about Glenn Funk, my boss and the district attorney of Nashville, who himself is a terrific trial lawyer.
And was defense attorney for decades.
And has hired a lot of Rich's students, I guess, at Vanderbilt, who are now using what he taught them against him.
And he's also hiring younger lawyers who've been to the college. They were defense attorneys. They come to the college. They get incredible training from all these wonderful trial lawyers. And the next thing I know, they're over there as assistant district. Yeah, I could rattle off 5 or 6 of them.
That's interesting. I had not realized how many of our young assistant DAs had gone through your college and training, but that's all for the better as far as I'm concerned. But eventually they'll go back out into private practice.
Hey, here's what I tell people. I live in this community. I'm raising family here. I have children and grandchildren. I want good police officers. I want good district attorneys. I want good defense attorneys. And any time that I can help in any way, any of those folks and any of those, I represent a lot of police officers now,
Yes.
and I have found that to be a really rewarding experience.
It's no easy task in today's
Hey,
environment.
listen, being a police officer is really, really hard.
Yeah,
Nothing-
or representing one, too.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
can be
it's-
difficult.
yeah. Well, I tell you what, I hate to quit, but we're going to have to wrap
Okay.
up here in just a minute. Are there any projects you have yet to accomplish in your career or your life? Anything? Or do you intend to retire? And
No.
if so, do you have any post-work plans, any type of retirement?
No, this is, well, I'll tell you one thing
Your
I have
passion
done.
in life, yeah.
The one thing I have done, and I've been doing this now, I had heart surgery 11 years ago, and I always tell people it was an oops during the surgery and everything turned out okay, but it led me into the world of acupuncture, which led me into the world of Tai Chi, which led me into the world of the study of the Tao. I am blessed on having had the privilege of working with the Grand Master in Wellington, New Zealand 4 years ago.
Is that right?
And COVID will not allow us to return to New Zealand, but she has agreed to continue our training, and once a week we train with the Grand Master. They talk about technology, thank God for Zoom. COVID did something positive. It got us a weekly training session with our Grand Master.
Of Tai Chi?
Yes, Tai Chi.
Just for the uninitiated, what is Tai Chi?
Tai Chi is a philosophy of life, and it's the physical side of the study of the Tao. And the Tao is a philosophy of life centered around nature and the yin and yang concepts of life and how to overcome the difficulties. It is it's both, you train your body, your mind, and your spirit.
Terrific.
And my grandmaster, who has accepted me as a student, which is incredible honor, my wife as well, and my son, the three of us, Kevin, it has made me a much better lawyer. As a young lawyer, I thought there was only one way to practice law as a criminal defense attorney, and that was you were a killer. Everything was loud, aggressive, in your face. I would beat you down.
Bombastic.
Absolutely. Well, those were the way, when I first went into private practice, the greats that we talked about, that's the way they were trained.
Right.
Well, people are different. Our jurors are different. That hostility is not persuasive, and it's all about persuasion. And the study of the Tao and the Tai Chi has enabled me to maintain a balance. And I have an ability to question a witness now with a stiletto instead of an axe. And you can actually do
As
more
you
damage
demonstrate,
with a
actually,
stiletto.
Rich McGee, you've always had that skill, but maybe the Tai Chi has improved.
Well, it has, and I guess the one thing as a lawyer I'm the most proud of, as I've gotten older and through the help of a ton of people, including my teachers with the Tai Chi, I'm a better listener. I'm very conscious of mindfulness, of wanting, of trying to learn and understand my clients. First thing I say to all my clients is, we'll talk about the case in a minute, but tell me about you. I want to know about you as a person, which shocks a lot of the people that we deal with. They've been treated like pieces of meat too often. And it's like, I want to know about you as a person, please. I have clients write out autobiographies. I have clients' families write out the family histories. Because I tell my clients, I have a story to tell, and you're my story, and how can I tell it effectively if I don't know it? So I've become, and I teach this concept, and I'd like to think that over the years, I have become a better listener. I am my own worst critic. I had a hearing yesterday on a case, and I'm still grinding my teeth because there were a couple of questions I didn't ask, even though I had them prepared. Again, I'm my own worst
I
critic.
actually heard from an independent source that you represented your client yesterday very effectively. So
Well,
you're
I'm
being
glad
a bit too modest.
And that's just.
But
I have been studying the art and science of cross-examination since 1980, when Posner and Dodd first wrote the book. And
you
I'm a
didn't
junkie.
read Francis Wellman, The Art of Cross-Examination?
I've read that, and I've been blessed to receive training from some incredible
I can
lawyers.
tell you always had it, because whenever I've had a matter with you, I've dreaded having to sit my witness down and tell them how to prepare for your cross-examinations, because they inevitably end up in my witness being made to look either foolish or deceitful or both. So,
Counselor, you got to be careful who you call on the witness stand,
you're
right?
right. But there's nobody.
Well,
anyway,
but my goal for the future, I got to get better. I am determined to keep studying, and then try to pass it on. So people say you're going to retire. The other day, my wife laughed. Somebody said that, and she looked at this person, and she said, "You should have heard Rich's conversation with his client the other day that I had to listen to because it was on speaker because his cell phone wasn't working." She said, "He's not getting ready to retire."
I have great difficulty imagining you being very happy very long in retirement.
I agree.
And I think you'll be. But other thing that sets you apart is your willingness to pass along your wisdom and experience to the younger generation through all of the classes and informal stuff.
And Paul, that's yeah. I mean, that's just.
I didn't realize until now how much teaching you've done, both just.
And then what's painful is when I'll be talking to young lawyers, particularly, again, from other parts of the state, and it's like, well, I've never, I say, well, don't you guys talk? I mean, I understand it might be Carthage and there's only 20 of you, but why don't you all get together and talk? And they look at you like, because...
Do they view each other as rivals?
Yeah, and it's like, they'll get my secret.
Yeah.
And I sit there and I say, give me a break, dude. Are you kidding me? I said, that's silly. I said, you need to be helping each other. And we got to help each other get better at what we do.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, this is how we're served. I tell my students at Vandy and I always do the brand new baby lawyers when they have their orientation.
To bridge the gap.
Yeah. Here's what I tell them. Keep in mind, we are servants. That's what lawyers do. We're servants. You got a law degree. Is it supposed to impress me? That's nice, you got a law degree. Okay. What I want to know is what are you going to do with it? Everybody who walks in our office, every victim and victim's family that you're dealing with, on the other side of the coin, okay? But it's that circle. It's the yin and yang circle, right? Every person that we as lawyers come in contact with are saying to us, help me, please. That's what they're saying. Help me. And I've never represented a corporation. I'm not going to represent a corporation. I represent people. You don't represent corporations by and large. You represent people. Because even when you were doing all the economic crimes prosecution, bottom line is there are people, and there are people who are being victimized by thieves. I don't like thieves any more than you do. Okay? But we're servants. Lawyers are servants, and somehow that Rambo image of lawyers, thank God, I think is gone. What was it, 20 years ago?
It was big in the 80s and 90s.
I'm going to be the Rambo lawyer.
Yeah.
Well, nonsense. I want to be remembered as an attorney who cared about his clients and who cared about his fellow lawyers and as someone who served the community.
Thank you so much, Rich McGee. You also be remembered for being an extremely ethical attorney whose word can be trusted. So you have fulfilled the obligation of attorney not only to his clients by serving them, but to the legal profession as a whole. And thank you so much.
Thank you, brother. It's a nice thing.
All
I
right.
appreciate you saying that.
All right.